Still 0 viewers?
2 viewers.
Well, this is being recorded, so might as well start.
Yeah, might as well.
Okay, so to the 2 viewers, we are doing while loops. So while loop is pretty much like you repeat code to to do anything really. Yeah, for pretty much as long as you want, or until a certain condition isn't met. And so they look kind of like this. They have a few parts. You have the while itself. You have the condition where like if you can see the mouse here, I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah, we can.
So you have the condition, so it will keep repeating while x is greater than 5, and it will execute whatever code there is. And you have the open and closing braces, which just tell it when the while loop starts and stops, pretty much. So in a bigger example, looks a bit like this. And step through it a bit. Start with x equals 0. X is less than 2, so we're going to do the loop. So step through it a bit more. And once you reach the end, you loop back to the top. Up, and again, x is less than 2. Keep going. So now x is not less than 2, but since we haven't reached the end of the while loop yet, we're still going to execute the rest of the while loop. So we execute that, then it goes up, sees, oh, x isn't less than 2 anymore. Let's go back down to the bottom, then it prints done. So then you'd probably guess what happens if you go in the conditions false. X is greater than 5, it just skips the whole loop. So then let's say that you're having a while loop and you need it to execute at least once, even if the condition's false, and then after that you could optionally execute it again if the condition's met. So I mean, you can do this, but it's really not a good idea because you're repeating code. What if you are going to have, what if you need to change the code that's here and then you forget to change the code that's here? It's just not a good idea. So if you try to do that, I have some advice. Just don't do that. So you can do what's called a do while loop, which looks like this. It's much the same. You have the do keyword, but it's at the beginning and then the while's at the end. And then you have the condition here. And since it ends with something that's not braces, you have the semicolon, which you need. And so that in more context looks like this. So you set x equals to 1 first, just for this example. So you have the beginning of the loop. Just to note, do it doesn't actually execute anything. It's just the marker for the loop to start. All right, it just when it hits the while, that's how it knows where to go back to. Then goes through the loop. Now x is 2, end of loop, And so hit the while loop, the condition's true, so it goes back to the do and does the loop again. So now x is 3. Again, since you haven't evaluated it yet, it still finishes out the loop. So then you have that. Then it takes a look and says, oh, x is not less than 3 anymore. So I'm not going to be doing the while loop anymore. And it prints done. So then you'd say, and this is the part that we were talking about before, about how the while loop could also be, how it executes once no matter what. So start with x being equal to 0. Oh, it's just a marker. Prints out that it's in the loop, and then it takes a look at it and says x is not greater than 5, so I'm not going to be doing the while loop anymore. And then it prints out done. And this is the last example. So start with x as being 0. Oh, and if you take a look at it, ignoring this part, it wouldn't execute at all normally. But like if it were just a normal loop, so going into the loop prints out that it's in the loop. Then we're going to set x to 5, and this just goes to show that even if it's not in the even if it wouldn't meet the condition when it goes into the do while loop, it can meet the condition inside the while. It could change to meet the condition while it's inside the do while loop. So x is greater than 3, and it'll keep going forever because it never changes something that's not greater than 3. So just a review of what we learned. So while loops repeat code while condition is met. Do while loops make sure the code runs at least once and then repeats it like a while loop. When you're writing code, try not to repeat it, because then if you're changing one part of it and you forget to change the other part, bad stuff happens. And when you're writing while loops, make sure that you don't get stuck in an infinite loop, unless that's what you want. But most of the time it's not. Okay, so our first activity is, well, exercise, whatever you want to call it. Our first thing is counting. So using just while loops, print out the numbers between 1 and 20. We are going to post a link to a form in the description. And you could submit it using that. We're just gauging where the programmers are. Or it's not it's not necessarily a test.
Right. So if I do remember correctly, we did put the solutions on this slideshow.
Yeah.
So just pause the video for a second, and take like a minute or two and complete that. Okay.
Yeah. We're going to assume by now that you paused it, so we're going to move on a bit. So one solution. This isn't the only solution. There's plenty of others. So this is just an example. So start with I being equal to 1, and since you're counting to 20, you want to do it until it as long as it's less than or equal to 20. Then print I, set I equal to I plus 1, and you'd see I incrementing there. Loop back to the top. 2 is less than or equal to 20, so continue. This is going to take a while, so let's generalize. A few moments later. So I is now 21. Loop to the top. Well, now it's greater than 20, so it's not less than or equal to 20 anymore. So let's finish the loop, and I don't have a printout done, but And our second exercise is what's called FizzBuzz. So using just while loops and if statements, iterate from like a 1 to 100, but if the number is divisible by 3, print out fizz. If it's divisible by 5, print out buzz. If the number is divisible by both 3 and 5, then print out fizzbuzz, and otherwise just print out the number. Also remember your modulus or remainder operator. It's a little confusing, so we're going to show like the example output. So it goes from 1, 1's not divisible by 3 or 5, so just print out 1. 2 is not divisible by 3 or 5, so print out 2. 3 is divisible by 3, so we print out fizz. 4 is not divisible by either, so we print out 4. 5 is divisible by 5, so we print out buzz. 6 is divisible by 3, so we print out fizz. This continues on a bit. 14 is not divisible by either, so we print out just 14. And 15 is divisible by both, so we print out fizzbuzz. This continues on. 98 is not divisible by either, so just print out 98. 99 is divisible by 3. 100 is divisible by 5. So let's go back to the previous slide. So you'd pause the video again. The same link in the description will have the form for the fizzbuzz.
I think you're gonna have to complete the first activity first, though. If when I looked at it.
Right? Yeah. And then you submit it all together. Alright, so going on to the example solution. So you start with I being equal to 1. So then you're going from 1 to 100, so same thing as in the previous. Then we do a bunch of if statements. So if it's divisible by 15, because if it's divisible by both 3 and 5, it must be divisible by 15. So then we print out fizzbuzz. If it's not divisible by 15, but it's still divisible by 5, we print out buzz. If it's not divisible by 5, but it's still divisible by 3, we print out fizz. And in all other cases, we just print out the number. And then we increase I by 1.
Right. So I think we went over system.out.println line. The reason I just bring that up is because it's not really part of Codecademy or anything like that. So for now, if you don't know what it is, all system.out.println is going to do is take whatever its parameter is, and it's literally just going to print it out. So if you're a little confused on that, that's what it does. And then similarly, system.out.print does pretty much the same thing, except println is going to once it's done printing out whatever the parameter is, then it's going to go to the next line. Whereas system.out.print won't. So.
All right. So that's about it. We will probably do another one on Tuesday, although no guarantees about that.
Yeah, it might be over the weekend or something, just to get it recorded and over with. So that also you guys have more time to look it over. Oh, win-win situation.
Yeah. And then the next meeting is after Thanksgiving, I think, right?
It's supposed to be December 1st. So also that day, it's Team Picture Day. So try to make it to that. Also that day, we haven't totally discussed it yet, but we were thinking about giving another one of those assessments. So make sure that you're doing your Codecademy and
yes, continue the Codecademy.
Yeah, I mean, if you get these examples right, you probably would be fine, because it's pretty much what Codecademy has been like. Yeah. So, but I mean, there's stuff like data types. I don't think that's really on these two, 3 examples. So,
yeah.
Um,
Loops are just one of the few things that Codecademy is lacking, so that's why we're teaching it.
yeah, and while loops you really have to know. I think for loops are covered in Codecademy. It's a different type of loop that we didn't go over tonight. But personally, I've never used it on programming the robot.
But it's
Um,
useful in pretty much every other programming situation, so
yeah. I mean, technically, I have used a for loop once on the robot. Let's just say it didn't end well. Uh, yeah, that was not fun. All right.
so continue your Codecademy. If you're in programming, join the programming channel in Slack. If you're in controls and you still haven't joined the Slack, join the Slack.
You better.
So have a good night, I guess.
Yep. This should be available on YouTube as soon as possible. So sounds good. See you guys soon.
All right. Bye.
Stopping broadcast.